Nice page
Well,
on that.
will these be apartments or condos, or is that determined yet?
Rentals or condos?
We're still in the study period.
So they could be either.
We are looking at both options very carefully. Your input is very important. Yes, ma'am?
I would say that there are a lot of people who are clamoring to live downtown, looking for larger units, and people with kids or having kids and staying downtown. And that's something that I think that you should keep in mind. You know, maybe increasing the size or offering more 3-bedroom units. I guarantee you they would go like hotcakes.
Is there a point to actually the cut that you're talking about for the parking on M Street?
Right.
So that the M Street folks can park on this side?
Right.
Is there a reason, rhyme or reason to that?
It's not yet been discussed. It's something that, you know, we discuss just in general, try to address the concerns of the community. That we were reaching out to that developer to see if they'd be interested in an easement to try to get more cars off the street. That was the purpose of it.
Do you know like how many houses that could potentially affect if that
No.
worked out?
I don't know how many units are in that I mean, that was a project that went through, I think, the community recently, and so, Michelle, what was the project that's on, that has no parking
On M Street?
on M Street?
The Orange House.
Do we know how many units?
Now I can't remember.
I think 7.
26.
Six,
Yeah.
7, 8.
Okay, so we're reaching out to that developer to see if they'd be interested in having an easement to be able to get access to the rear of their property. And that would then hopefully, we understand that parking is a concern. And what we're trying to do is trying to figure out ways to mitigate it, talk to the community in advance. And one of the ideas that the development team came up with was, what if we could provide an access to that landlocked site to possibly get more cars off the street to help this community, knowing that, you know, this project is going to have, you know, it was originally an apartment building. There's an apartment building right next door. And so I obviously understand the row house nature of the area, but there's also, you know, history of this being an apartment building, the apartment building next door. And so the question was, how can we try to mitigate the concerns of the community? And that was something that's not been finalized, but it's been worth looking into.
Because that, let me tell you, so that Orange House was, as far as like the zoning and the parking, that was like a community failure. They did not want to hear, certainly they didn't want to hear from me. It did not work out. They sided with the developer. So given this opportunity, and if the developer for the Orange House takes it, it would be absolutely fantastic. But there's no guarantee. There is no guarantee.
Are you, maybe this is too far detailed, are you planning on this being like a front desk building or a?
At this time, there is no consideration being given for having like a front desk lobby. It's more a combination of trying to bring the best elements of the neighborhood together. You know, one of the things that I think wasn't really emphasized was that considering the authentic architecture, and let me go to 3D, that happens along the 4th Street corridor, these first two units over here looked at and planned right here are really treated as townhomes. So we did take special interest into consideration to try to keep a consistent urban fabric of row home or homeowner type of language with regard to the design elements. And then what we wanted to do with the density was make sure that we had a mix of units so that we didn't just appeal to, I think it was called the yuppified population, if you will.
That's who you're appealing to. This is all rhetoric. You keep talking about keeping up with the architectural integrity and not destroying any of that. You're destroying the integrity of the small community neighborhood by bringing a gigantic building.
Jude, you were gonna, okay, let's let him finish, and then we're gonna have other people ask
Sure.
questions.
So the simple answer to your question is, at this point, you know, with regard to amenities, you know, one of the focuses that we want to bring to this corner, which is basically such an important part of the neighborhood, is to look at what types of retail might be used to accommodate not just the community that is going to be extended into this structure, but also what can we do in terms of leveraging what you guys would like to see. Some people have said something about a bike shop. We've also heard about coffee. So those are the types of positive influences that we want to bring into this project to try to help make it appreciated by the existing community and also be able to extend to where the future is going. I mean, someone asked, you know, is there oil, for instance, somewhere? And I mentioned that right now we have a study going on to try to figure that out. Well, to the extent that that oil has to be remediated, somebody's got to pay for that. And so to the extent that we can take the problems associated with the blight and the history that you all are basically playing a role in now involuntarily, these are things that have to be spread against opportunity costs that causes us to have to look at the unit count to make sure that we don't lose. At the end of the day, we want to be good partners and good stakeholders along with you, but we're not a nonprofit. But to the extent that we can come in and make a match and do something together, that's why we're here and that's what we want to walk away with.
So let me just add, I was the one who brought up with them this whole coffee shop because I knew about the zoning for that space. So people talk to me all the time about the green building, about the Hoagie House. Let's have something business-wise in there. You know what? Don't count on it. But this might be maybe a solution. I don't know if it'd work, but that's how I presented the idea to them.
Yeah, I mean, I would love that. I would love a place where people in the neighborhood could, you know, people on 4th Street could, you know, could see our neighbors in something a little bit more than just passing each other on the street. That would be fantastic. You know, you'd have to be very careful about tenant selection, and I think that would probably be the tipping point at which, and this is more of a larger neighborhood thing, we need to do something about people going the wrong way on 4th Street. Because I mean, no,
Cameras are coming.
no, well, but I
Action
mean,
taken.
but you know, if there's an actual business, and I know it's gonna be, I know the idea is for it to be neighborhood focused, but there's an actual business on 4th Street, then, you know, we need to make sure that there aren't cars zooming back and forth both ways on 4th Street, because it's already dangerous.
To piggyback on your question there, you asked if this was front desk building. One thing that we are still in the process of studying is how many entries we have. So right now we have everybody coming through to this common entry, and the lobby is very small for the size of the building. We didn't imagine it as being a front desk building, but it could be. The other option we were thinking about is what if people come through, you know, on Ridge Street. Typical for the
I like
street,
that better.
we have
Multiple
private
entries,
entries.
Yeah.
That's something that we're
Enlivening the street pedestrian,
Right.
rather than having one access.
Right.
One idea also for alleviating the parking issue is people that, I think this has worked out before, I have no idea how this happens, but you build a giant new building, but the building is zoned so that the residents don't get residential parking permits. And I think maybe that's a
Yeah.
really good potential to look at that alleviates, you know, and then, maybe some car sharing as well. There you go, that alleviates a big part of the parking.
I've worked with a lot of, go ahead.
So actually, here's a real example. If you are familiar with the Reddick project on Ridge, the previous project 2 months ago, that there was a big flurry of activity that's going to be in the middle of the block. So zoning actually sided with the residents, and it hasn't happened yet, but it was their suggestion that there would be, no one would get a parking sticker there, and that is what they told the developer. But that said, nothing has happened yet, and that is what zoning proposed to them.
And I think,
So-
I mean, I've worked with a lot of clients who have offered that. We haven't had a formal discussion about that on this project. As I said, we're very early on in the stage, but you know, those are ways to mitigate the concern. And one of the questions that we had was the concern about the, you know, size, or is it a concern of the size impacting parking? And that's a way that we can definitely work with the community and hopefully try to mitigate things. And we'll obviously discuss that with the team and get back with the community on that.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, I do think if you're doing a 26-unit building, especially with renters, I think that does change the fabric of the street a little bit, because it is right now primarily owner occupied. And so to me, I see a big difference between 26 units apartment and 26 units condos.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing your comments.
A couple of questions. It was zoned in 2011, approved for 10 units. So what changed between then and now? And in terms of density, yours is the densest project in the neighborhood. and I'm just not seeing why. I mean, why 26? Because it was zoned for 10,
Well,
and you
there was
only
a,
added one extra parking space.
the applicant, the owner looked at doing that and obviously determined that that could not be done. And now, years later, when he's obviously in the point again where he can pursue development of the project, has reevaluated it, and this is where we are right now.
But the zoning said it wouldn't approve.
We-
Now, what makes you think they're gonna approve it now?
We are going to be seeking relief from the zoning board, and we are here today to talk with the community before we even file the application, to try to get feedback. And obviously, we will then be filing an application with the board, meeting with the community again, and trying to see if we can address some of the concerns so that this can be a collaborative effort.
At 26, I don't see it. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
What is the overall square footage of the project, with what you've got here, and what would be the overall square footage of what you could build maximum matter of right?
20,000.
Like, how does that compare?
The overall development is not, I mean, if we're talking about square footage, is almost the exact same to what would be permitted. There's a small delta.
Mhm.
I don't know, it's, in words, just the,
You're talking about if we would build to by right versus what we're proposing, lot occupancy.
but you're
So-
talking about overall square footage, you're not talking about,
Overall square footage of
we'll have
like
to look
all
into
the
that, but I mean, it's,
floor.
right now, the first floor doesn't obviously, go out to the overall lot occupancy.
Mhm.
It's actually only because it's being pushed back on the top level.
Right.
So we'd have to look at that, and get back with you.
So
And-
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, with your relief, are you seeking like a major increase in square footage of what you're allowed to build, or is it a major increase in the number of units?
It's not a major, we are seeking, the relief is based on the number of units. And the lot occupancy is a very minor degree of lot occupancy because of the addition on top of the historic structure, having to cantilever over the rear.
Okay, so basically you could essentially build the same building with less units and have them be gigantic. And not,
Potentially.
and not like have any relief.
Potentially.
I'm just trying to understand.
If that was a viable option, the size, yes, the size in general, minus the a small degree of lot
Right, right.
occupancy, do you know?
Right.
Minus the
Right now
hangover.
we're at 75. So we're at 75 lot occupancy, 60 is by right.
Okay.
We're not going higher, we're not building a taller building, we're not coming over the height limit at any capacity, we're right at 40 feet, minus any architectural embellishments if they come up over the cornice, but that's less than 5
Okay, so basically if you stuck at 60%, you could fit like 12,
mega
as you
units.
said, 2,000 square foot units.
Sure.
I wouldn't call them mega, I mean, 2,000 square feet. The Truxton Road development across the street,
Well,
they're townhouses and they're done as duplexes, and they're, they're basically, basement one is,
sure,
and they're 2,000 square feet each. And that's what's, personally, I think that's what's more in character with the neighborhood, and that
Right.
is about 2,000 square feet
yeah,
gross. Now admittedly, Truxton Road, what they have is, the first floor is kind of done as a loft style, so they lost like half of the floor.
mhm,
But that was their design decision. Ultimately, they have roughly each level.
And
of
I
1,000
mean, the
square.
reality is every project is unique, and this project has its own challenges, and so that's why we're here. We will, obviously, the development team will go back and the owner will go back and look and consider your comments. Are there any other comments before we wrap up?
Yeah, I have a question, a couple of comments. The question is, what's the origin of the oil and gas, do you know? Why would oil and gas?
It was
even-
just a pre-existing commercial use.
It was like a gas station or?
Yeah, so.
Oh, the taxi
It was a
stand.
taxi, and there was also a
Okay.
petroleum and oil storage facility.
Motto Coal Company,
Okay.
circa 1930.
It's kind of scary.
So-
Yeah.
When you excavate all that stuff, can you just put in a parking garage down there?
It's a great idea, it's very
So you wanted
expensive.
You wanted to know about the coffee shop. I think that's a great idea. You hear all of our concerns about parking. Obviously, everyone has the same concern, where it's just like a constant musical chairs, and it's very frustrating. And then on weekends, we get not only our neighbors parking, but we get people that are going to Chinatown parking, because I see them park and walk down there. And then when there's something at the convention center of local interest, we get parkers that are attending things at the convention center, so if you leave on a Saturday, you come back, you may not be able to get a space even close to home. So unfortunately, if you're adding more parking problems to the neighborhood, that's a problem from my point of view. I'm old-fashioned, I'd rather, whatever's behind it, I guess I'm not as concerned about the size. I'd like it to look like row houses. I find much of the more modern building in Washington to be quite ugly, and since it's a neighborhood, I just would like it to look like it's individual houses, row houses, even if it isn't.
And that's something that we're definitely hearkening to along Ridge Street. We recognize that that's the scale, and even though we do have a 100-foot lot, we're breaking it down into intervals of 22 feet. And really, like, whether they have the aesthetic of a traditional federal style or Victorian age style, however you want to call it, the massing, we believe, will potentially be more row home in nature. It's the interesting point where it turns the corner and meets with the existing building where, you know, who knows?
So just
Sure.
the last point, which is probably lost it. It's gone.
It'll come to you.
Sorry.
The one thing I don't think you guys mentioned, but I think we talked about the mezzanine, is that the top floor?
That would be the top story, right?
Top floor, so what is that, what's it consist of?
We're not quite sure as of right now. We've drawn it as a full story, but it wouldn't be a full story. It would be either part of the units, it would be a third of the units below them, so they would have, you know, a little loft style area, or it would be a double height space. It could take many forms.
My idea came back, sorry.
Yeah.
Just you want input from the community, so tell me.
Yeah,
I'd rather have it be owner occupied than renters.
Understood.
Yeah.
Duly
I
noted.
think one more question and then.
Okay, a question, I don't know if you know the answer or not. In terms of the reading on Ridge Street, the square footage of the space, is it about the same as the corner?
Well, the whole, the project, the lot itself is larger. I think that's,
So
I don't know, I don't
they're
know.
only putting, they only what, 8?
What's that, the concern was those buildings behind remember there's the two sets, and then there's the walkway business? Remember there's two sets of
Yeah.
buildings? This is not really, you can't really compare the two. So, this lot is probably slightly bigger. Okay.
Yeah, one of the constant tension, I think, is always between maximizing your revenue here and then also dealing with the community. What would be helpful to me is I'm not a developer. I don't know. I understand kind of the concepts, but I don't understand kind of what the bottom line is. And if someone came to me and was to tell me that I can't develop this unless I do this and show me actual figures as to why that's the case, maybe I would have a different view or at least be more open to things. But I'm not so sure that's the case. And I just have a feeling that it's just more about how much more we're going to get out of it as opposed to making a profit out of it. So, you know, if you want to take that on board and then come back to us with something that would help us understand that better, the economics of it, I'd be willing to listen to it. And I think that would help us evaluate.
If I may say, this is all gonna be part of the
This woman
BZA
has been
case, yeah,
sitting
you actually
here.
have the right to cross-examine and ask for
Can I-
stuff.
Okay.
Sorry.
She's waiting to.
Sorry, I was concerned.
I
They
actually
must
live
prove
right
Sorry.
next door. Oh, sorry.
In the apartment building next door?
Yes, I do. And I share that party wall. So I am concerned about excavation. And one thing I would want to say, I understand you're increasing the lot coverage, even if it is cantilevered over and it doesn't actually turn into 100%. To me, it looks like this pretty much is a 100% spread footprint. I also work I'm an architect. One thing I love, and I know I'm a renter, I've lived here for like 4 years. The lot is derelict. I'm happy to support development improvement. One thing I really love about that corner is the garden, former garden, whatever it is, green space. So the zoning requires, I believe, a green area ratio, and I was wondering if you are considering that or considering some kind of other green neighborhood amenity to replace sort of what you're absorbing.
The green area ratio does not apply to R4, but I think it's definitely something that the developer and the team will talk about, and we'll come back. I think that that's something that, whether there's apartments or there's condos, it would be an asset to the project overall. So we'll obviously, I really appreciate there's no other kind of new comments, then I think, unless there's any additional.
Okay, so moving forward, as you know, I'm very transparent. We constantly put out information all the time. So I'll be working with them, coming back to the community. They need to come back to the community because the previous development on Ridge, the developer did not come back to the community, and frankly, it was a disaster. So that said, if you guys want to talk to them a little more separately, otherwise I'm going to post the video on our YouTube and some plans on the Facebook page and all that. But I'll once again reaching out for comments from all the 4th Street people and the adjacent neighbors for the other streets. Okay, but we'll be in constant dialogue, be assured. So, all right, that's it, you guys.
so much.
Thank you for coming. Yay, Dr. Sanders is hosting this thing.
We'll post the meeting schedule, that should be great.
Yes.
Hi. Not so bad.
Thank you for coming.
Well, you know what?